everyone. My name is Josh Green with Artist Aaron Academy, and today I'm going to introduce you to my friend Michael Flora. He's going to talk to us about post-humanism in art and how he used these ideas in his thesis exhibition, Pedesis, at the Turner Gallery in Alfred University. Hi everyone, it's Josh Green with Artist Aaron Academy, and today I'm interviewing Michael Flora, who's my good friend from Alfred University. Michael just graduated from there and now he's back in California. So why don't you say hi, Michael?
Hi. Hey, Josh.
Hey. So you're gonna tell us today about the main ideas in your thesis, Pedesis, which are a post-humanist point of view when you make art.
I guess I'm kind of antagonistic towards like this very anthropocentric view of creativity.
So why don't you explain what exactly that means?
So yeah, this talk is sort of presenting this challenge to a lot of like traditional notions of creativity. So I want to like talk about non-anthropocentric or non-human centered approaches to art making. And so I suggest view of creativity that is more in like collaboration with materials. And so I'll kind of give an example of a very like classic approach to the creative process. This is 20th century composer Edgar Varese. I might be pronouncing that wrong. I don't know. He's French. But he declared that, he says, "I dream of instruments obedient to my thought, and which with their contribution of a whole new world of unsuspected sounds will lend themselves to the exigencies of my inner rhythm." And I found this, when I came across this quote, I found it really interesting because it suggests that when he makes a work of art, he first has an idea of what he wants to create. In this case, like a dream. And then he uses tools or instruments to make a copy of this mental image. And I don't think that this like idea of creativity is really unique in any way. You know, you kind of have this idea and then you gather some tools or instruments and materials and then you make it. But I think that it also suggests that the artist is a person who's like always in command of his tools and instruments in this case. And he even says that he wants these like tools and instruments to be obedient and therefore like kind of passive. Whereas like his imagination, his dreams, his ideas are kind of seen as like dominant, I would argue. And I want to contrast what Varese's idea of creativity with this Tokyo-based shakuhachi player, Kentaro Idemitsu. And he's a vocal proponent of what he calls old-style shakuhachi music. And he has this quote where he says, "It's better to leave the expression up to the bamboo rather than myself trying to express music by manipulation. Many people appreciate bamboo's sound rather than my sound." And so, unlike Varese's dream, in which he disapproves of anything other than obedient instruments, Idemitsu's account of creative accepts and even embrace expression of the instrument. And so I see it much more sort of like a human and materials dialogue, which produces the artwork through this relationship.
Okay, so Varese, he began with a thought and then passed that thought through the material, which he wanted to be completely obedient to get the final product, which exactly resembled what he imagined. But you're talking about a collaboration with the tools, with the materials, and together you decide where the artwork's going to go.
I think like Varese, he sees the tools, the materials as sort of like mediums to creating the artworks that he sees in his mind. Whereas Idemitsu kind of like removes some of his own ego and accepts what he calls the sound of the bamboo. And so for me, this kind of suggests that he's like interested in the sound the instruments make, or what the instruments and tools can do. And so I kind of want to introduce this concept of the non-human. I think, as we've seen with Idemitsu, it seems that like things and objects possess an agency of sorts, that they're like operative or actors, sort of a complex relationship. And I don't think that this is like really just an idea specific to Eastern traditions, but it comes from like a wide range of intellectual and philosophical positions. And a lot of keywords that I'm seeing in contemporary usage for this kind of idea is like vibrancy, material vibrancy, or agency, or material vitalism. And so sort of what I'm kind of going towards is this idea of entanglement, where humans are sort of in this entangled relationship with material agencies. And so there's a lot of like key theories right now exploring this world: speculative realism, new materialism, agential realism. And they're really interesting because I think they like challenge a lot of the assumptions we have about the human and non-human, and like nature versus culture, or the mind and body. And so I think with this kind of thinking, it's almost like better to think of the world as like one filled with various types of agencies, and a world that is just like kind of continually doing things, whether they're human or non-human.
What is some materials that have agency that you work with?
For me, technology kind of guide my own process. And so I see it as sort of like a back and forth with various like electronics and machines, especially like computers tend to be what I generally tend to favor in my art practice. Just to kind of explain why I would be attracted to other material agencies dictate the kind of artwork that I produce. I want to share a quote from Maya Deren, who is a filmmaker. And what she said is that I had begun as an artist, as one who would manipulate the elements of a reality into a work of art in the image of my creative integrity. I end by recording as humbly and accurately as I can the logics of reality, which had forced me to recognize its integrity and to abandon my own manipulations. And so I really like sympathize with this kind of thinking, in that a lot of times when I'm in the studio, I'll think like, oh, I wanna do this. I wanna create this thing. But then when you start working, you realize that, oh, like the materials you're using, they don't wanna be shaped into this way. They don't wanna do what you tell them to. And so I think it's kind of like what Maya Deren says, it's more about just being sort of sensitive to your environment and to your materials and to your tools, and what are they suggesting. And when you open yourself to allowing those agencies to come to the forefront, I think that's really when like something interesting comes out of it. What I wanted to do is create sort of more of an immersive environment. I think generally as a person, I'm more attracted to experiences than sort of collections of like one-off, or like collections of various works all sitting together in a room. And so I wanted to have like a very cohesive, conceptual, and very embodied kind of experience. I use this example of flocking birds to kind of suggest this idea that you have these individual elements that all have their own behaviors. Like with birds, flocking is all about like, oh, I want to like follow this bird in front of me and the birds to my left and right, but I also don't want to run into them. Through just like this very like simple like kind of rule set, these birds make these like really beautiful formations. Kind of suggesting is that with like art making practices, like when I'm working towards a large scale project such as Pedesis, I'm interested in putting sort of like processes and materials into motion and then kind of seeing what comes out of it.
And pedesis is a scientific word. It's another word for Brownian motion.
Yeah, pedesis is, I think it might be Greek, which is a word for Brownian motion or sort of random walks. And it refers to this motion of particles in a fluid. That was like a sort of a big starting point for me on this project, was kind of like looking to nature actually for inspiration, looking to nature for these like behaviors that could lead to some kind of large scale environment. And so this is actually a picture of the space.
This is Turner Gallery.
Yeah, Robert Turner Gallery. And it's huge.
Yeah.
It's like 2,500 square feet.
Yeah.
And you can see that there's like 2 floors. There's sort of like this downstairs area. And it kind of opens up to this atrium with like a mezzanine, like a catwalk up top. And then there's this huge floating box like above the entryway to the gallery. I decided that I was going to use light in this project because I felt like light it filled space differently than any of the other visual things I was making at the time. And I felt like it was the closest analogy to sound. Like they're both waves and they both reflect off of surfaces. I was just like, okay, like I got this giant space, like what am I gonna do with this? So that was like a huge part of like developing this project. It was like, okay, I wanna work with sound, I wanna work with light, and I wanna work with space. Those are my materials. What are these materials telling me? Like what am I supposed to do with these things?
And so instead of having a plan set, you're going to go into this space and work with the space and see how the white light works and how the sound works.
Yeah. And so bothered me about how other people use this space was that they tend to hang things on the wall or they put stuff on the floor if it's larger sculptural works or like on pedestals. But I felt like people didn't really utilize the height of the space. So the space lent itself to creating these hanging structures. I decided that like I was gonna devise these like hanging loudspeakers that are like coupled with light bulbs. And so you can kind of see my sketch on the left, my original idea, and then me testing out these custom made light bulbs. And then on the far right is sort of this image of the actual like sound and light hanging in the gallery space. And so like right away that became like, I think I'm really working with the space that I have available to me by hanging these light bulbs. In the end, there was actually 8 light bulb speakers hanging from the ceiling, and they were all like independently controlled. So this is kind of going back to like Pedesis or Brownian motion, sort of like a little GIF that gives you a visual of what that movement looks like. Brownian motion became a concept and idea for like how to control these lights, how to control these sounds. And so for me, the way I'm most comfortable creating things is through code. I was able to sonify the Brownian motion into using these different coding environments.
And so the code, it becomes kind of like you were talking about the birds, how they had their goals, you know, they wanted to follow the bird and they didn't want to bump into the birds. And that was sort of an algorithm in a way,
That's
right? And now you're copying that over into the studio.
I'm using algorithms that sort of like mimic these logical behaviors and rule sets from the natural world. Here's an example of like me just playing with some of the lights in my studio, and you get a feel for sort of the logic of the movement. Or the way I was approaching this project was thinking as a series of behaviors, and the way these behaviors are organized in time kind of interact with the gallery space. So this is kind of what it looked like once everything was up and running. I kind of knew what I was doing. Like a lot of the behaviors were already programmed. You know, where I was going to put this technology in the space was really had to be figured out in the actual gallery. You know, blasting sound into certain corners of the room or shining lights on certain parts of the room. Here is an image of some people visiting this space. The lighting like produced like polychromatic washes of various colors on the walls, and then there was like these video projectors like projecting these scribbles all over the place.
Yeah, it was intense.
Yeah. I got so many images from people at the school, things like this. People were fascinated by this. Like here you see 2 people taking a picture of their shadow on the walls. If you see this image here, you see people's shadows were like composites.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just got so many photos of this kind of thing. Everyone was like super into it, super fascinated.
And that was one of those sort of spontaneous things that came out of working with the tools.
Yeah, exactly. So like I didn't predict this. This wasn't something I was trying to do, but it's something that just came out of the project. Also because the way the projections would shoot across the room, moving vectors projected on a wall, but you can see how some of it catches on the wiring. It would look like the vectors are like moving up and down. Sometimes it looked like they were like crawling up and down the wiring. And so that was another thing that I thought was really cool that I like never really predicted.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So you showed a few examples of how like the shadow on the wall and then the light going up the cable. And so you wait for moments like that to happen. You're like, thank you, technology. That's a great idea. And you run with it. You keep pushing that. And so that is your creative process, working in collaboration as compared to having a set idea and ignoring all this nice little accidents that happen.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you, Michael, for sharing all that. It was incredibly interesting to hear this different creative perspective. And I think more artists are moving in that direction, and maybe culture too, think it's more interesting, isn't it, to have all these accidental moments or unexpected things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me as an artist, like I want to be surprised by the work I create. Fun to like just have an idea in my head and then make it exactly as I saw it or heard it. To me, like surprise is like one of the most exciting things in life.
Yeah, and so you really rely on the accidents, like the shadow and things, to
Yeah.
really make the piece a piece.
It's funny because, you know, you tell people that you love this, the accidents, you love this, you love what comes out of this way of working, but then, you know, you'll be working with an algorithm or something and you'll hit go and it'll produce this sound and I'm like, I don't like that. And so it's actually like a lot of back and forth and sort of, because I do have aesthetic interests that I'm really interested in. And so inserting yourself into the algorithms or inserting yourself into the process.
Yeah, so there's bad accidents too, which you edit out.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michael.
yeah,
And
thanks, Josh.
I hope I get to see you soon.
I know. Maybe you'll have to come out here to California sometime.
Yeah, I'd love that. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.